What do you get when you mix a bottle of Laphroaig Whiskey with 3 charming Weimar raconteurs? You get a freewheeling conversation that touches, among other topics, on the mostly disturbing, though occasionally hopeful, similarities of the Weimar period with our own days, the enduring importance of the poetry and plays of Bertolt Brecht, why New Orleans might be one of our last bastions of Weimar culture, and on bringing to light some lesser-known artists of 1920s Germany. Over my kitchen table in New Orleans, I was joined by Sarah Brecht, David Symons, and Harry Mayronne to discuss their fascination for the Weimar period. Sarah Brecht is the granddaughter of the playwright Bertolt Brecht and an extraordinary artist in her own right, creating gorgeous and vibrant paintings. Harry Mayronne has been musical director for countless Weimar-inspired productions, and as a creator of marionettes, he has brought his puppets to innumerable stages, including bringing a very small Bertolt Brecht to the stage of the Berliner Ensemble. David Symons is the creator of the annual Brecht Fest festival in New Orleans and has been exploring the music of the Weimar period his whole life. And Laphroaig, well, that's a smoky and peaty alcoholic delight that serves to lubricate good conversations everywhere. Welcome to the Weimar Spectacle, where I explore the brief and extraordinary life of the Weimar Republic. I'm Bremner Fletcher Duffy, singer, actor, and theater maker. I've spent years performing songs and theater from the Weimar period, and I'm inspired and maybe more than a little obsessed by that moment in time. Normally, I post a transcript of the episode on my website, but for this episode, there's no transcript of this conversation. But what you'll find is images of the artists mentioned in this episode and of my 3 guests and their work. You'll find those on my website at bremnersings.com. BREMNERSINGS, all one word, .com. bremnersings.com. And apologies for the longer than normal gap in between episode 4 and this one, number 5. In those 2 months, I recorded my first album of original songs with a group of friends down here in New Orleans, and I also just hit the road for a 6,000-mile tour of various festivals with a couple of one-man shows that I do, so it's been hectic. So my big idea for these podcasts is that the Weimar Republic invented everything about the modern world, and we are all still dealing with the possibilities and problems it gave to us. To prove this possibly unprovable idea, I'll be exploring the arts, politics, science, architecture, social innovations of the Weimar period, and of course, the terrible and irresistible rise of the Nazi Party. So, if you're a politics junkie who's getting more than a little worried at the parallels between the tactics of the National Socialists in the late 1920s and the tactics of the Make America Great Again movement in the mid-2020s, or maybe you're a sociologist who's looking for parallels between the wild ambitions and failure of this century's Occupy movement and the wild ambitions and failure of the workers' councils of the Weimar Revolution, then this is the podcast for you. Microphone's there, so I guess orientate yourself towards the mic. And I have a bunch of questions. I will introduce you guys. I'm here with Harry Mayronne, puppeteer, piano player, theater maker, arranger. Anything else, Harry? Anything else that I'm missing?
I think that's everything I've done lately, so
yeah,
it sounds
there's stuff in your deep past that we don't know about?
It'll reveal itself. It's going to. Yes, of course.
Sitting with Sarah Brecht. Sarah, do you have a middle name?
I do, McDonough.
Huh?
McDonough.
McDonough?
Yeah,
oh.
My mother's name. Yeah.
Oh, it's pretty Scottish. Is it Scottish or Irish?
No, it's Irish.
It's Irish.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Sarah Brecht, painter. And I don't know, anything else?
Maybe?
Cook. Yes, definitely cook.
Like to cook.
Pie maker.
Excellent cook.
Cake maker extraordinaire. Yes.
Yes, her souffle made me cry.
Wow.
Was it
that good or that bad?
To be fair, it's pretty easy to make Harry cry.
Don't want to make me mad, right?
It's kind of sweet.
No,
I have benefited from your cakes
No.
quite often.
No.
And David Symons,
Accordion
player, arranger, band leader, accordion repair artist?
Accordion technician. Accordion luthier, you could say.
Accordion luthier. Okay, great.
That makes sense.
And we're all kind of wrapped up in the Weimar period for various reasons. Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Do you guys have anything that you wanted to bring up before I launch into my questions that I have here for you all? Because we're all in New Orleans, and it is really, really kind of odd that we're all in New Orleans.
That's why I mentioned that. What I was saying was, it's interesting that the three of you have moved here, at least part-time, and because you wanted to be here, and yet what has connected us has seemingly nothing to do with New Orleans at all, but not necessarily so. And I'm curious on your thoughts on that, because I'm from here, so I'm too close to it, but how would we relate Weimar to the culture to here is what was on my mind.
Well, I remember
the cultural scene here that drew you here, whatever. I think the weather drew you here, if I remember.
Yeah, but it's the culture too. It's the culture too. Yeah.
You said something about the rain.
Yeah, the rain
you
definitely.
Get away from the rain.
Yeah, from Ireland. Yeah.
Was it just fleeing the Irish?
Just the weather.
The winter.
Unbelievable, just nonstop and darkness. But wonderful country. But
Yeah,
I just needed some months of sun.
Growing up in Scotland.
Oh, you know what I'm talking
It was
about.
just brutal.
Yeah.
It was intense.
Yeah. But
How about you, David? What brought you here?
Well, I moved here from Vermont, from northern Vermont, and I think just the kind of dirty, wild life that New Orleans has, that we all love, and the incredible music. I mean, just the level of music here for a city of 380,000 people is pretty astonishing. And just the weirdness of it, I guess.
yeah.
I remember hearing about the production of Waiting for Godot that happened in the Bywater just after Katrina, and thinking like, wow, that sounds amazing. It happened where did it happen? It happened, I think, on one of the washed out lots right by the river, and they strung up some arc lights and did Waiting for Godot, and sort of the devastation, like the post-devastation of Katrina. And it was wow. You didn't know about that? Oh yeah, it's this epic kind of.
I think I knew of it, but how soon after Katrina?
I think the either the fall or this.
You were probably in New York.
I was probably in New York.
Oh, you were in New York.
Or by the time I came back, it was very challenging to reacclimate to being here.
Right, just the devastation.
It was just everything was so odd, and the weird thing about 2020, I felt, I know the routine. We've already been through the city being shut down, so I felt better prepared for that. But I don't remember that. I didn't see it, and I probably was aware of it, but I was just trying to cope. I was trying to get my gas turned on.
Oh, Lord, right.
You got it turned on in November.
Basic things.
Basic things.
Yeah, I remember seeing, I think it was in that empty lot that's right down towards the end of Charters, the corner, right down near Poland, and they just basically strung up, and there was only 200 people in the audience, but it was just...
That's wonderful. That's why I love the city. I mean, it's just like that. It's still kind of a free place in this country for artistic expression and music, and I mean, the people I saw on the street driving over here today, I was thinking, God, it's just like the Weimar Republic. Suspenders and sort of everything showing, and the whole thing. And it's wonderful.
There was this is a long time ago, production of Marat Sade that took place where Little Dizzy's was once a theater called the Mise en Scène.
Okay.
And this production happened, and a friend of mine, Paul Werner, was in the show. And if he's listening, he can correct if any of this is incorrect, but I believe from the accounts that I have what happened, because I saw it. I wasn't there the night this happened. The police raided the theater in the middle of the play and hauled off. They confiscated the list of people who were there in the audience, and they hauled off the entire cast to central lockup. And the director, if this is true, instructed them to remain in character. Have you ever seen Marazzo?
It's set in an institution, isn't it?
Yes.
It's basically a madhouse.
Yes. I mean, there was people grabbing your feet under the bleachers.
It sounds like something that was elaborately staged, but you say this happened.
It happened. I remember when it happened, but they booked each person. This is in the music count with the crime they were portraying. They were all booked with contribution. Oh yes. Nymphomaniac, whatever.
Prostitute murder.
Yeah. And they were all booked, they were all charged with contribution to the delinquency of a minor because there was a 17-year-old in the show.
Uh-huh.
It had something to do with censorship at the time. I don't remember. I don't remember, but it was just an odd thing that happened. And they were ultimately, I think by morning they were let go, but what a story that was.
I think we have completely answered what New Orleans has in common.
There you go.
A very short conversation.
There was a production of Marazzo a few years ago in Araby, in this like corrugated metal shack out in Araby.
How did I miss that?
I don't know. But anyway, it was so echoey in there you couldn't really understand much of the dialogue. But the police did not arrive at that show. So
Trapped.
I know.
Oh, how I'd love to have been there that night. But yeah, next time you're in Little Dizzy's, just picture that. It's astounding.
Next time I'm there ordering my fried chicken, nymphomaniacs. Okay, shall I launch into? Would anybody like any Laphroaig? We're sitting here at a big table with a bottle of Laphroaig. Would anybody like?
I think it would.
Or is it too
lend
early?
itself. It's never too early.
Never too early. Okay. I would love to save it.
It's not something you.
Do you want ice?
No, it's not shocking.
Do you like?
I do.
Sing along?
I do. I like whiskey.
Does anybody want any ice with their whiskey, or are you purists?
Neat.
Take it neat? Okay.
It's a melancholy experience for me in a way. My mother's companion a few years ago, after Katrina.
This will liven things up.
Yeah, maybe Harry, you should take that one.
Anyway, when I sniff it, I always think of him. And it's my favorite Scotch, but it also is, it's just a sweet melancholy experience.
It smells like Ireland too.
It's going to be
it
like
smells like peat.
It's going to be like an audio edition of Drunk History.
Exactly.
Yes.
An entire bottle. My God, it's so smoky. Great.
But thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, fuck, that's good. I'd say fuck right because it's just a podcast.
It's just a podcast. I think we can say any language on. You can swear. You can proclaim whatever you want.
So get out of regular broadcast mode.
Yeah, no. You can.
I have a
swear,
built-in
you can say
filter,
shit and
nothing
down, screw and
ever
bugger
comes
you
out,
and all those things. I don't know if there's any board of trade that complains about dirty language on podcasts.
No, I think you can do whatever you want.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want. Okay. Let me launch into questions. Hey, you guys started Brecht Fest in New Orleans.
Well, David was actually the catalyst of this, so you could.
Right. So Bertolt Brecht is your grandfather,
Yeah.
and is this playwright from the 1920s and 30s and 40s and 50s. When did he pass away?
It was, I'm going to caught him as 56. I think it was 1956.
56.
Yeah.
How old was he?
He was 58.
Oh, he was really young.
Am I wrong? It was one or the other. I always get 56 and 58 mixed up.
Okay.
It was 56.
It was 56.
It was, yeah.
56.
Yeah, 56.
Wow, him and Weil left really early.
Yeah.
He was 1950.
Yeah, 1950.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made it to 50 years old.
That's extraordinary when you think how much they each created.
Yeah. And how much, yeah. Over 2,000 poems.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable.
It's amazing.
Plays, everything.
Wow.
So David, what was the? I know we met. I had come back. I'd been in Berlin. You were there doing the concert with Nina Hagen.
Mm-hmm.
I went to see the Salt Wives. Ben Davis was with, and they were doing some Brecht, and we struck up a conversation. I became a huge fan of yours, and of this.
Feelings mutual.
And then we did Happy End together, the Brecht Viol piece. And then you one day said, let's do Brecht Fest. And what did lead you to?
Well, do you want, how far back do you want me to go?
As back,
Whatever is.
Let's.
So I think I grew up in rural New Hampshire where there was, none of this stuff was around at all. There was nothing like this. And I guess, I toured around the country in a van with the Klezmer Band in 2001, and we had a tape deck, as one used to have in cars, and we had this cassette tape of the Threepenny Opera of the 1955, I think it was, off-Broadway version, the Mark Blitzstein translation with Lotte Lenya and what's her name from the Golden Girls, B. Arthur, and we listened to this tape over and over and over again as we drove, probably, I think we drove 5,000 or 6,000 miles or something like that. So I got very into Threepenny Opera, and that was pretty much all I knew about Brecht and Weill. And then living in Vermont, I had some connections with the Bread and Puppet Theater, which is very much in the Brechtian tradition. So I think that kind of prepared me for that material. And I spent a little time in Berlin. I spent a few months in Berlin playing in a band there called The Painted Bird. This was in 2006. And this was a very Brecht-inspired project. And while I was there,
how do you mean Brecht-inspired? What was the? What does that mean?
Okay, well, so it was sort of it was basically a cross between Brecht and Yiddish music. So we did a lot of Yiddish music, but a lot of the more overtly political Yiddish songs. And it was very theatrical. It was fronted by this guy named Daniel Kahn, who has a theater background like me. I've also done a lot of theater, and so it was just very very influenced by Brecht and Weill, and I don't know. I don't want to get too much into the details.
Where did you perform?
Clubs, theaters,
nice.
On the street sometimes. And anyway, while I was in Berlin, I still didn't know a whole lot about this repertoire beyond Threepenny Opera, but I was lucky enough to see a production of Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni at the Maxim Gorky Theater, and that just blew me away, even though I couldn't understand the German at all. It really hit me. And then I also got to see a production of Threepenny Opera.
Can I ask what hit you? Like what is there apart from just being like, wow,
the music first and foremost, because I couldn't understand the words, but I mean the meaning of it was fairly clear. I mean, even without getting the words. But I just really fell in love with the music of Kurt Weill, and in Vermont, where I used to live, I was recruited to play in a Kurt Weill tribute band. Which
in Vermont,
it just happened to be there.
Of course,
a man named
bubbles up everywhere.
A man named Michael Chorney, who then later went on to create the musical Hadestown with Aeneas Mitchell, asked me to be in this Kurt Weill project, and it was pretty short-lived. I think we only did a couple of shows, but it just got me kind of deeper into this music, and then the next kind of big revelation, I guess, was when my friend Lydia introduced me to this book of songs by Brecht and Hans Eisler, another composer. And that book had a really big, just a really important effect on me. And because I didn't know about this whole repertoire of of songs that Brecht wrote with Eisler. And so then I went down this whole Eisler path. And then,
is there any difference that you can put in words between the stuff he did with Weill and the stuff he did with Eisler?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, they worked together longer. I mean, they were lifelong friends and collaborators, whereas Brecht and Weill split off at a certain point, and went to America and became a Broadway composer. And I mean, musically, they're quite different.
Well, they're very different politically, too.
And politically, that's sort of the big difference. For Eisler, music was always to be used in the service of revolution and the liberation of the working class, and whereas Kurt Weill's concerns were more aesthetic in nature, I think. Although he was also quite political.
Well, if I may, David, we have not talked about that before, that your first experience was the Duluth production of Three Penny Opera.
Yeah.
Because that was my initial introduction to all this.
I think probably
as well.
Yeah, I think to the extent that Americans know this stuff, it's probably from that record. Which
You know what
you still find it in like the 50-cent bin thrift stores. I mean, it clearly was a big seller at the time.
You know what I remember? I was in, I think, in junior high school. I was listening to it, and my aunt and uncle were at my house, and Mac the Knife, the guy was singing, "Oh, the shark has."
Yeah.
And I remember my aunt said, "Well, he's no Bobby Darin," and I had no idea what she meant until years later. But my friend June, I think you met one of my mother's friends.
Yeah.
I was at her house one night with my parents, and we were talking about the Three Penny Opera. And by that time, I had absorbed the libretto of that particular recording that you mentioned. And she gave me her copy of that double album that was recorded in 1958, which is where I sort of picked up German, because I knew the text. Mm-hmm. So I listened to it in German. I knew what it was. And so we had a similar introduction.
Yeah.
But I'd say mine was more personal. It had my introduction. My father took me to see Lottie Lenya in Cabaret.
Okay.
And I saw her in Three Penny Opera. She was very old, but I saw her in a college production.
Well,
She was a good friend. She was a good friend of ours.
Yeah.
She was lovely.
She was, I remember she asked where I was from, because my father bought me a painting that they had Kurt Weill, Lottie Lenya week in Tallahassee, Florida. And
Of course they did.
the Lemoyne Gallery. And her
These were different
third, I
times.
think it was her third husband, Russ. Do you know of him? Her husband who was a painter?
I used to go up to her place in upstate New York on the weekends. And she had this is my memory.
Oh, she probably has some
Is
of
this
those
the
paintings
house
in
that
her
Harry
home.
Weil bought in upstate
Yeah,
New
in
York?
upstate
The
New
little
York.
gray house?
Yeah.
Okay.
And she had these 3 bedrooms, and I remember she had it was a bit like Gloria Swanson in that film.
Sunset Boulevard.
Sunset Boulevard. And she had this sort of a bald butler who was sort of showing us around, and she had these 3 bedrooms, and each bedroom, I remember her saying, this bedroom was for this husband, this bedroom was for that husband, this bedroom was for that husband, and it was decorated accordingly to the
Tribute.
a tribute. But she outlived all of them.
Did she have a pet chimpanzee or primate? Or something?
No. I mean, I could tell you stories about Lottie Lenya. I really could. She was amazing.
This would be the time.
But anyway, my
Was it
father...
just her energy that was amazing, or just her spirit? Because she seems like she
her
just
spirit
has...
was incredible. It was incredible. My dad had a party once. Should I tell this story?
Yeah,
yeah.
My dad had a party once where he decided he was going to greet everybody at the door with hashish cookies.
Wow.
Without telling them. And my mother was running around trying to warn everybody. And it was all we were all involved in the theater in New York City, in the off-Broadway scene. All of these guys, drugs, normal, no problem. It was the thing. There was something in the hash that sent everybody crazy. People were banging down walls. People were fainting. I mean, my mother and I were laying bodies out until 5 a.m. Wow. But Lottie Lenya was the only one. She had 10 of them. And I think she was probably in her 80s at the time or something like that.
Oh my God.
And she seduced one of my father's best friends who was gay.
That night?
And probably half her age. And, took him home. And I remember her saying to my dad, "Another cookie, darling. I'll have another cookie."
Wow.
It was quite a night, I have to say.
Amazing.
Yeah, because I've read the letters of Weill and Lenya, and there's just such, like, you see pictures of her, and she's not sort of this, beauty, 1930s beauty queen, but there's so much passion in the letters, and you're like, wow, he must have had just so much, like, there was such a connection between them, but he obviously felt so passionate about her. And even with all the other people that they were seeing and all the other affairs that they were having, there was something between them.
Yeah.
It listening.
The
to
thing that
something
always stands out that she said, it's a rather obvious quote, when she said something about people do threepenny opera, for instance, and always try to take it so seriously. And she said, it's a famous quote, she said something like, people don't realize how much fun we were having.
Mm.
And I think that you just completely backed that up with that story.
Yeah.
So anyway, just to get
sorry.
the breakfast. No.
Right, that's where we were trying to get to. David, why did you start?
It's a long journey to breakfast.
These things are always complicated, and they have lots of facets, and there's Laphroaig involved.
So I had organized some big concerts to raise money for causes that I believed in previously, with all different musicians and
in New Orleans.
Right.
And
with Leonard Cohen.
I did one for Leonard Cohen right after Leonard Cohen died, which also happened to be right after the 2016 presidential election. And then I had this idea to do a Brecht Fest, and the idea was never for it to just be about Bertolt Brecht. It's just a good name. It turns out other people have used that name, but I didn't know that at the time. I came to this through the music as a musician, and then really it wasn't until I got some books of Brecht poetry and started going through them that I just really fell in love with the poetry of Brecht. I'm not as familiar with his plays. I've read a number of his plays. I've seen a few of them, but there are something like 40 plays, and I've only really scratched the surface of that. So anyway, I had this idea, and I just looked up. I wonder when Brecht's birthday is, and it was a month away, which seemed to me like, okay, that's perfect. That's the perfect amount of time. I'm gonna book a venue, and I was able to get the Always Lounge, which is where we did Happy End, and actually where Harry and a bunch of other people did Threepenny Opera right before I moved to New Orleans. I called Harry, and Harry was very excited about the idea, if I remember correctly. And then we just immediately started asking. Well, I think Bremner was probably the next person we called, because Bremner has done a lot of this material, and
it wasn't hard to. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. There's so many people that are very knowledgeable, or very interested. And I remember I asked you last year if you expected this to be going on here.
Yes, sir. Were you surprised? Come to this refuge in the South,
probably the last thing
and
you
then
expected.
Here's
it
this.
was the last thing I expected. I grew up with Brecht who, especially in this country, and so it never was a part of my life in a way, except for in the family. But when I came down here and I lucked into all of you, and other people too. I was really amazed at the knowledge about them. And
there are a lot of them.
There's a lot of them, but for me it seems right. We're in the right place.
Right. So then a few days before the show happened, the very first breakfast, I got an email from the manager of Always, who said, by the way, Bertolt Brecht's granddaughter is coming to the show, and she's bringing 10 people.
Yeah.
Were you slightly stressed by that news?
Yeah.
I said I hope one of them isn't her lawyer. And yes, I was. I did feel a little. I was already nervous because it was a big show to put on with practically no rehearsal. But I was a little nervous. I really wanted her to like it, and luckily she did. And that's where we met the very first after the show.
I was far too shy to even go up and say hello after the show.
I went up. We were trying to figure out who said hello to each other first the other day, but I kind of remember going up afterwards, and I just absolutely loved it. I really did. That was wonderful.
And we're still there. It's such a perfect. It's like the perfect place.
Yeah.
And every night during the finale of Threepenny, when they were singing the last line, and life is strange and ghastly, and living it is punishment enough, which is a rather dismal line, but there was something joyous about it at the same time. And I remember every night tearing up and thinking, what's on the other side of the door is this quirky neighborhood. And I was looking at this cast that Dennis Munn assembled of I remember when I first met him over a bottle of Laphroaig, and he told me who was going to be in the show and the descriptions. I thought, this is either going to be a horrible train wreck or it's going to be what turned out to be absolutely life-changing in a most spectacular way. You know, and it continues, that whatever that was continues with all of you. I really appreciate that you all came here. Thank you.
Well, I think it's
Really.
I think it's wonderful, and
What blows me away is like the audience reaction to the Brecht Fest. You know, it is essentially 2 hours of some of the grimmest, darkest statements that you can cynical. I don't know if they're cynical or they're not cynical.
no, they're not cynical. Cynical hides the truth.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
they're cynical is
They're
they're
very-
actually quite honest.
I think
They're
that's an
honest
important
and they're
distinction.
honest.
That's an important distinction.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but yet the audience leaves delighted, overjoyed,
Yeah.
with smiles on their face.
Well,
Do you guys have
I
any
think-
opinions why that happens
I
with
do.
that material from the Weimar period, like being reinterpreted now?
Well, it's very resonant now. Unfortunately, I mean, I think I think Brecht probably would have preferred that this material seemed like some strange relic from a troubled past, and now that we're all living in this socialist utopia, but. But no, we're living in dark times, and so many of the issues that he wrote about are still with us.
But why do people leave so filled with joy? Sarah, do you have any opinion? Like they really leave happy.
I think God, I haven't really thought about this, but I think we live in a time when we don't speak our mind, and we're afraid to speak our mind. You know. And I think when you go to one of these evenings, it's real. The talent is incredible. And there's an honesty to the thought and what's being said that's incredibly refreshing to people. They're like, oh, and they can just wake up and, there's a clarity to that. That because we're all hiding behind these sort of walls of being worried about what someone's going to think of us and will we offend and all that. I think that is refreshing, and I think it's very needed.
Yeah.
Well,
I think a big part of why it works is the music is good. I mean, the music has to be good for it to work, and we put together a really good band. And there's something about the friction of having this beautiful music and then using this beautiful music to say an upsetting thing or a difficult thing. I think there's a hunger sometimes for something that's a little more tied to, rooted in all the problems that we're facing in the world. And
it is relevant.
And you read the headlines of various trials and issues and wars going on right now, and then you hear Brecht really cutting through all the issues down to it, and I think he makes them very human. He doesn't. That's I think why we still listen to him, is that they're not sort of a large political statement about issues of the time. They're incredibly human,
and so much of it has aged really well. I mean, you listen to this. The music sounds contemporary. The music still sounds modern, and the words still sound, a lot of it still really holds up. So it doesn't feel, even though a lot of it's 100 years old, it doesn't feel like a nostalgia act.
I think that's why some of Weil's Broadway works aren't redone, because they're very, he was struggling with writers who wanted to write about the cultural situation at the time, and it's kind of, it feels stuck in aspic. It feels very like back in the 1950s or 40s, but the stuff from Brecht still feels, and again, I think it's because it's just so human. It just feels very current, and you can really relate to it.
It's not preachy.
It's not preachy.
He's not standing above you and telling you something that's wrong with you. He's standing next to you and telling you something that he did.
Like, do you have a sense of, because you hear stories about Brecht and that he was an absolute pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But then you hear his poems, and he's so self-deprecating and so commenting about his own frailty.
Yeah, he was fully aware of it being, a human being that had a lot of problems.
Was a pain in the ass occasionally. Right.
Yeah. I mean, his family loved him. What I get from his family, whenever I would ask questions, is how wonderful he was to them and all that,
Oh, that's really nice to hear.
Yeah.
Because the sort of the overall arching story is sort of like, I don't know, all the issues and problematical things. So it's really great again to hear the human quality of the guy.
I think he was a big old softy
basis.
at home sometimes. Yeah.
Oh, that's
I got that from the.
Yeah.
That's
from
nice
that,
to hear.
Yeah.
I got that from that creaky video of the House on America, that interview. That I told you that influenced the Marionette was when he said what I wrote was a German play. He got a laugh.
Yeah.
He got a laugh in the courtroom. I mean, I thought that impressed me.
Right,
That he got a big laugh in the courtroom.
Harry, that is the perfect segue into you live in a house with a very small Bertolt Brecht.
I do. And a very small Leonard Cohen, and a very small Boris Vian, and a very small Tennessee Williams. I have just become, without planning or meaning to, been bringing these literary figures to life.
As puppets.
As puppets.
Right.
But the Brecht one, the reason I did that one was and you were there, when I went to do the concert with Nina Hagen, which came up.
You have to, the people behind this thing are going to be like, what? Nina Hagen? You did a concert with Nina Hagen? With a small
Well, what happened? I was this.
back up a little
the
bit.
way that started was I was looking up recordings of Irgendwo auf der Welt, the comedian harmonist song. It's truly my favorite song. There's a song of hope, and I discovered that Nina Hagen sang it at the Berlinale Film Festival, and I was inspired to build a marionette of her, not the one I use now. And I sort of became obsessed with that. And about a week later, after I finished it, I read that she was going to be doing a Brecht concert at Berliner Ensemble. And I was going to be going there for one reason or the other. And a mutual friend gave us an email introduction, and I wrote to her, and 20 minutes later she said, come to Berlin, we'll make a joint venture. And so I went, you went to the September concert, this was June, I went there, I literally didn't know what I was going to do. When I realized that there's a possibility, that's when I built the Brecht marionette. I thought, well, I should do this, and I sent a picture. That's what it was. And then he said, she really wants you in the concert because the Brecht marionette. And I'd forgotten all of this. And I went and I said, what would you like me to do? And she said, Little Puppet's beautiful. And she said, let me smoke a cigarette and think. And she went outside and she said, you will be the spirit of Meister Brecht, and we'll all be cozy together on the stage. And when I say Mickey Messer, you do whatever you want. And so that's what happened.
I have to say, you provided me with one of the most memorable moments, because when I grew up in sort of a punk rock era, so I actually had like a wild crush on Nina Hagen back in the day, and
when we sang Irgendwo together?
She was just like my ideal woman kind of thing, which says a lot about teenage me. So I went to see you at the Berliner Ensemble perform with the Brecht puppet, and then we ended up back drinking at the canteen, and then late at night we're all in the parking lot, and Nina Hagen comes out and you're talking, and then eventually you proposed
I said, could we do something? She said, what? I said, could we sing Irgendwo? She said, of course.
And me and Chris, we ended up like singing harmony, so we're like arm in arm in the back of the Berliner Ensemble, quite drunk, singing like with Nina Hagen singing this comedian harmonist song, and I was like, kill me now.
That's amazing.
It was wonderful.
Did you confess your childhood crush?
No, I didn't. I was too shy.
We sang at the top of our lungs, and then she said, they're English words too, and she sang it in English. But anyway, my personal connection with Brecht goes back to seeing Lotte Lenya as a kid, and then being in Munich and seeing Gisela May for the first time, who was known for doing Mother Courage at Berliner Ensemble, and also I was reading something about her the other day, and if I remember correctly, I think Isla, she was not a singer, but Isla heard her and encouraged her to sing, and she became a singer. She was considered one of the greatest interpreters of Brecht. I saw her in Munich, and the thing that was interesting about her concert, she was doing Evelyn Tucholsky, Brecht, and Isla, Paul Dessau, and Kurt Weill, and I remember there were very young people in the audience, and they were costumed. It was not like an elitist group. It was a very hip concert and hip audience that is there to hear that material. And then she came to New Orleans to do the Seven Deadly Sins with the Philharmonic. So I got to see her twice. So these little, as I call the dots in my life, the Brechtian dots that can continue to connect. So my connection comes from the material, but it's also very personal from my life experience.
Sarah, I wanted to ask you about your painting.
Yes.
Because, do you think that it has some, I don't know, connection with the artistic background of your family?
I don't know. I was sort of giggling to myself the other day about it, actually. I was thinking how un-Brecht my paintings are.
That's kind of what I was thinking about.
Well, maybe they are lately. I'm sort of in a bit of a quagmire lately, but
because they're so filled with color and joy and beauty and they, I don't know, there's just so much vibrancy about them.
I don't agree. I don't agree with that at all.
Really? You don't agree with that? Okay.
No, I don't. I mean, what Bremner was saying, that they're just writhing with life, in a way that, I don't know. That's part of what we love about the works of your grandfather. I think.
Thank you.
But I mean, it's very different, of course.
Yeah.
It's your,
Right.
it's your own thing.
Yeah, I've never thought about it. I've actually never thought about it. I've never thought about a connection with him in that way. My father was very adamant that there was a disconnect when he was bringing us up. That when I asked if I could learn German, it was no, absolutely not. And when I asked him questions about his background, it was, let me change the subject. It was only before he died that he started talking about his father and his grandfather and me. But he was very adamant that we followed our own trail, and we weren't hampered, which I think he was in his life, by having this sort of icon above him. But I think what did come through the whole thing, I grew up with no dinner ever was shorter than 3 hours, and it was always full of arguments. And whatever the argument was presented, you took the opposite side. And you had to, that was how I grew up. And the idea was, I think, how do I put this together? I'm not sure. It's an honesty. It's some kind of a all right, never mind. I'm going to think about that one. I don't have an end for that one.
Well, and it's like an intellectual kind of discipline or rigor.
Yeah,
it seems.
yeah.
Like you have to be able to defend your ideas.
You have to defend, and you have to think. Yeah. That's the thing. If you sat there and spouted off some generic sentence to my father, it was just pandemonium. It was just, how dare you? Think, child, think. And so I think it's the honesty. You can't just relax into a cliche. And that, I think, came down.
I mean, I can see the connection, because, it's interesting that Brecht finds such a particular voice in his poetry, which you think can be quite an obscure, world, but he finds so much truth in the poetry. Yeah. And I'm not an art critic, but your paintings are incredibly poetic.
Oh, thank you.
Incredibly there's a mixture of realism and great imagination and fantasy and beauty.
They made my dad nervous.
They make your dad nervous?
They made him
How
nervous.
so?
Because he wasn't into color, and it made him nervous. Maybe that's why I'm so much into color.
Would he have preferred black and white monochromatic?
He liked black. He liked Prince. He liked Goya and Durer and listened to Bach, and he was very much that kind of a guy. So yeah. No, I'm sorry. I don't have a correlation between the two.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Even though it's not my show, did it feel like when you were growing up? Did it feel like a foregone conclusion that you would be an artist?
Yes.
That was just expected.
It was expected. In fact, he wrote in his will, one of his wills, he wrote that if any of us turned to the military or the police, anything we were written out of the will.
Right.
Well. And even my mother, I remember her one's attacking a man because he was a businessman. There was I grew up in the 60s and 70s in the West Village, and it was the theater. We grew up in the theater world. And as kids, you were expected to that was the only profession you were expected to follow in one way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in that way, you're very much in a line.
Yes.
Because I don't think Brecht's parents were artists.
No, they weren't. But
so he sort of began that, and then of course your grandmother Helena Weigel, who
Yeah.
Let's see. What else do we have to talk about? Do you guys think that, like, the Weimar, like all your work in the Weimar, all your time spent in Berlin with the puppets and Brecht and doing this stuff, do you think it, like, affects your life choices? Like, it has the morals? Because the 1920s in Germany are such a stark sort of battle between so many different factions of good and evil and possibilities. And do you feel like it affects? I feel like it does. It affects my outlook on the current world.
Absolutely.
How about you guys?
Yeah, well, it definitely...
and ladies.
It provides a model for how things can go. You had a society that was, I think, probably the most progressive society in the world at that time. And then we saw what happened in a very short time, where it just descended into absolute barbarism that ended up killing, 50 or 60 million people. So it's just a good lesson to see how things can go if you're not careful.
Are you in the camp that feels like we are in, like, just at the end of post Weimar, like that tipping point, or is that taking it too far?
Well, I think in a lot of ways we're already there. I mean, but I don't even give us the credit. I don't even give us enough credit. I don't think we've even earned the comparison necessarily to the flowering of the Weimar era. I mean there are particular times throughout history when there's this great flowering of creativity and radical aesthetic and political ideas, that happened in the 20s and that happened in the 1960s. And I don't necessarily think we're in one of those times right now.
If it's a slower timeline, I think the 60s and 70s was our great flowering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that this is sort of mirroring that in that it just happened slower.
Yeah.
But I think it is happening. This sort of division of ideas and this unacceptability of things being difficult, that everything has to be black or white now. You can't have things mixed. And the same thing happened at the end of the Weimar. Everybody sort of took a position. And no one would think, well, wait a minute, what's the other side of this story? And we're sort of at that same point, and it's very dangerous.
Speaking of, and when I used to read the accounts of Mahagoni, the 1931 full-blown 3-act opera, and being performed with lovely soundscape.
I did that on purpose.
With the lights up and the
Wait
police.
a second, that cork going back in the bottle, that was not a nice sound. What the hell's going on there?
Yeah.
Oh.
There we are.
As long as Harry. Harry needs some
That's
too.
a good soundtrack.
Here.
Oh, if it says. No, but I was saying this description I've always read of Mahagoni being done with the lights up and the police lining the walls always seemed kind of hard, kind of implausible. I couldn't really picture that, but in living through the times we're in, I can now. I can see that. I mean, there was a time where that didn't happen, but it's more, I could see that happening now. And it's hard to fathom what that time must have been like to go from what it was during the mid-20s, late 20s, to suddenly just getting so...
I mean, I think it's so interesting because it's such a pressure cooker.
Yes,
in 1918, everything falls apart.
Everything, yeah.
Everything. And then by 1933, the Nazis are in power.
Yeah.
So it's this little vision back there of how quickly things can go wrong, but also, like, as you said, like, if we're talking about the 60s to now, with people slowly pulling away liberties and slowly cutting them down, and this real plan to how to move society differently.
And no contradictions. You can't have contradictions. The funny thing, I was just thinking, in Ireland, it's a bit the same. You know, in Ireland, the church collapsed in the beginning of 2000s. With these reports coming out about pedophilia and all sorts of horrible things, babies and being killed and stuff.
And before that had been really
the church
like
controlled Ireland. I mean, it absolutely controlled all the rural communities. It controlled the schools. It controlled the hospitals. Even the Magdalene laundries ended in '98, I think. I could be wrong. You know, I mean, it's an incredible thing. And so all of a sudden, I was there when it happened. These reports came out, and it was like in 1 week. All of a sudden, the church lost its power. And what was really interesting about it is that the church had been the backbone of the morality in Ireland. You know, this is through the religion is how you judged your moral behavior. All of a sudden, that wasn't there. And so the people were floundering. There was this kind of floundering kind of, what do we do? I can't trust the priest. I can't trust the nun. I can't trust my church. I can't trust anything. And we're having this period in Ireland that's absolutely fabulous. You know, it's this time of ideas. It's sort of just like the Weimar in a completely different and very small way. It's this time of ideas. We're allowing abortion. We're allowing divorce. We had a gay half Indian president. You know, all of this wonderful stuff is happening. People are being educated. It's a period. I mean, it may change like these things do, but it's funny that these things happen after a period of chaos. You know, that there is this kind of, let's do this right.
It's chaos, but it's also the idea that you are, you know, before 1918 there was the Kaiser, and you know, in the Weimar in Germany, and he was essentially a god.
Yeah.
Like he was the religion. The Prussian authority was the religion, and everything, your entire life was dictated.
Right.
You know, your status, your military, or where you were in the bureaucracy, everything made sense. And then it falls apart, and I guess people are floundering to find meaning. And as they flounder to find meaning, they invent these new ways to...
They invent it. And what's interesting is it's a positive. You know, for the most part, it's a positive kind of, well, let's do this right this time. You know, then of course it changes, but I'm being a little dark, but yeah.
Things will get dark.
And there will be singing.
There will be singing. There will be singing in the dark times. Back to Brecht. Okay. Let's see. We've been going for a while. I think we can sort of wrap up pretty soon. Is there, so I don't know who listens to these things, but are there any other artists that you would like to recommend from the Weimar period apart from just Brecht?
I'm just not an artist from the Weimar period, but I want to mention John Willett.
I don't know.
Okay, so John Willett was a translator, one of the main translators of Brecht. And he was extremely interested in the Weimar period, and he did an incredible show on Otto Dix and his war paintings, you know, the war etchings that Otto Dix did, which are amazing. But I knew John, and I stayed with him in London when I was young. But I just wanted to sort of say something about him. He was an incredible person, and very much... I mean, he introduced me to all these Brecht people in London when I was living in London. And I guess I just wanted to say something about him. I was extremely fond of him, and I think some of the best translations are the Willett version. I'm going to go on record saying this. The Willett version of his poetry.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And those are the translations of the poems?
The poems.
The poems.
He also did the plays as well. I mean, he was incredible. But he was so interested in the Weimar. God, I'm going to have to... Yeah.
And how do you spell his last name?
Willett. How do you spell it?
Willett, I believe.
Yeah.
Willett. John Willett.
John
So
Willett.
translator.
Really special person.
For Brecht.
Yeah.
Okay.
He taught me how to look at... he took me to I'm sorry, this is not off subject, but he took me
it's
to
great.
Picasso, the period when he was doing all the things.
Cubist things.
Cubist, thank you. And I was just so like, I was in my early 20s, and I said, I don't like this stuff. And he walked...
These people have three faces.
Yeah. And he walked me around that museum and explained the whole exhibition to me in a way that I really understood it. He was a gentleman. He was a real gentleman. Yeah. Very fond of him. So I wanted to mention it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. That's good to have it on record.
Yeah.
Harry, anybody else from the Weimar period that you think anybody who's listening to this and is like, there's Brecht, there's Weil, there's Eisler, but is there anybody else who anybody should look up, or any favorite actress? You mentioned several women's names.
Well, Gisela May was later, but I think she's one of the best for just classic interpretations. She did some amazing recordings.
Okay.
And,
of the Weil material or the Brecht, or just Brecht and
Brecht, Dessau and Eisler.
Okay.
She introduced me to Eisler.
Gisela May.
May.
M-A-Y. Okay.
Yeah, she was amazing. Just for performance, and of course, there's so many wonderful recordings from the period. And the thing I went to hear a band in Berlin called the New Orleans Hot Peppers. It was a group of gentlemen who played New Orleans jazz, more obscure pieces, but it sounded like old recordings of a German band. The way Suzanne can do that, bend the notes. There's a style of playing that just sounds different, and it's so exciting to hear that. But they had a female singer named Ottilie who sang Ottilie, and they were at a place called the Kleine Laterne. I forget. They said it's the oldest club. It was like from 1960, because most of the places from way back are no longer. But it was just that old classic, that Weimar sound, that is still around.
Sarah.
I'm going to mention my grandmother.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
please.
Helena Weigel. So she was in that Weimar world, and that's where she met my grandfather. And she was already an established artist at the time. But I think she's representative of the women at that time who were independent, fierce, wanted their own careers, were going to go ahead and do it, and was slightly androgynous. And I think...
that is something we haven't actually talked about, because it's such a big topic right now.
It's
all
huge.
These incredible women in the Weimar period who were sort of helping, creating slightly in the background of all these male artists.
And not at the time, too. I mean, yes, I think that, they came out of a time where you still sort of let the guy take credit.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think, they were highly educated, which is a new thing for a woman, and they did have careers, and it was an extraordinary time. But I wouldn't just mention my grandmother as one of those people. Right. She retained her independence throughout her life with my grandfather, except for when they were refugees, because that was pretty much impossible. But she kept her own bank account.
Refugees in America?
Yeah.
Right.
And in Denmark and stuff. But she kept her own bank account, kept her own money, and often wouldn't tell him where she was, and he would get pissed off. And
And she kept the theater running, too.
And she ran the Berlin Ensemble. She was a powerhouse. I remember sitting in Buko out in the country, and she would have all these men, like powerful men, sitting at the table with her. And she was tiny. She was 5 foot tall. And they were terrified,
She was what I see from video. You knew her, but she seemed like an imposing person.
You didn't screw with her, But she was an absolutely wonderful. I loved her to bits. But
did you know her very well?
I did. I knew her very well. Yeah. I spent a lot of time in East Germany with her.
Wow.
Yeah. Growing up, spent my summers. But she was something. Yeah, so I just want to mention as an example of a Weimar woman.
Yes.
There you go.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, everybody's talking about Elizabeth Hauptmann right now, but it's good. Helen.
Well, she was another one. And there was a few, like Ruth Berlau. There was a number of them. They're extraordinary women. Yeah. Margaret Stephan.
David, did you have anybody to recommend that? From the names we're talking about.
Once again, I want to talk a little more about Hans Eisler, because I'm a bit of a propagandist for him, because he's just barely known outside of Germany. Very, very poorly known, and really deserves to be better known, I think. So Eisler was... people in classical music talk about the Second Vienna School, which was basically Arnold Schoenberg and his the two pupils of his that are always named are Webern and Berg, and
but there was another one, which was Eisler, who has kind of been written out of the history a bit. Eisler was, and Schoenberg always considered Eisler to be one of his most important students, right up there with Berg and Webern. And Eisler was actually the first of Schoenberg's disciples to adopt this 12-tone method that he invented. And Eisler, he's such an interesting figure because, for a lot of reasons, but I mean, first of all, his music is very powerful, but I feel like he really kind of walked the middle of this line, this tightrope. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was this sort of crisis of tonality that people were talking about, Liszt and then Wagner and Mahler had it was felt that they had exhausted the limits of the tonal system that composers have been using for hundreds of years. And so Schoenberg, of course, came along and, originally was writing this very, very dense romantic music in the Wagner style that was like almost atonal, almost. But and then he scrapped that and he invented a whole new system of tonality, which we don't need to get into. But
I still wake up with cold sweats because in university I was in a choral society, new choral society, and we sang a Schoenberg choral piece.
Oh my God!
Must have been 8 parts.
Must have been a nightmare.
It was. I literally wake up in cold sweats trying to remember how I'm going to come in on the next entry because they're all. It's a new tonal system, and there's no reference. You're just sort of pulling notes out of the air. So anyway, yes.
Yeah, I can imagine. So Eisler, he adopted this method, but he was also a very committed revolutionary communist, as was his brother and sister, and so there's this real problem here, that you're writing this music that's really, really hard to understand. It basically does away with centuries of tradition, and it's accessible to almost nobody. So Eisler, it makes his music very interesting because he believed that his art should be in the service of the working class of the revolution, and so he wrote all this music, which is, particularly the songs of Brecht, that is tonal and is very singable. He wrote some very famous revolutionary songs like a Solidarity Song and a Song of the United Front, which were sung by revolutionaries all over the world in all different languages. But there's always this kind of modernism to even the most simple of his songs. So to me, he just kind of stands right at the center of this schism in music.
You have recordings, right, of several of his songs with the Salt Wives?
Yes, I believe so. Yes.
Right. So people can find that
I've done
online.
some of his stuff.
Search for the Salt Wives.
Yeah. He's also a really good writer. Like I happened to bring this book of his essays, and he had a great kind of cutting wit. So let's see. I like this here.
Oh, was that a book of?
This is a book of his essays. On music. So he says this is how he starts the essay called "On the Situation in Modern Music" from 1928. He says, "For the dutiful gathered round the deathbed, death rattles are so wearisome they fall asleep. Their snoring sounds similar, and so it is difficult to ascertain who is actually dying. That is the relation between bourgeois society and modern music." And it goes on from there.
Tell it like it is, Eisler.
Anyway, very interesting figure, deserves to be better known. And
Is there any recording that you would recommend?
Well, there's a lot. I mean, luckily we have YouTube, so there's a lot of great Hans Eisler material on there, performed by Gisela May, who Harry was talking about earlier, and Robin Archer, an Australian singer, has done a lot of Brecht stuff.
Right, there's that wonderful video of Supply and Demand.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
With the whip.
With the whip.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
great,
There's also there's a very good documentary that I came across recently on YouTube about Hans Eisler called Solidarity Song, and yeah, you can just go from there. I mean, there's a lot of his stuff out there, but it's not well known here.
Right. So, is there anything that I have missed talking about that you all would like to mention about the Weimar, your own work,
What about you?
Well, they know about me.
They know about you.
I go on and on about it on the other podcasts. You guys are the stars here. So, I'm always shilling my websites and my stuff like that. But so, Harry Mayronne, puppeteer. How can people find out about you out there? If someone's listening and they're like in front of their laptop.
On my social media is my name, Harry Mayronne, Mayronne, harrymayronne.com website. I'm on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay.
Under my own name.
Okay, great. And so they can find that. They can find your puppets.
They can find
your recordings. They can find.
Yes, of course, they can find my puppets at Creason's Fine Art in the French Quarter.
Sarah McDonough?
Brecht. Yeah.
Yes. Is there people are interested in your paintings?
Oh,
can
okay.
they
So
find them?
well, because of Stephanie, she just did a website for me. So I have sarahbrechtpaintings.com.
Oh, wonderful.
SarahBrechtPaintings.com. Oh, I didn't know that. That's brand new. Okay.
It's new. Stephanie did it.
Sarah with an H.
Sarah with an H. Thank you. Brecht, and it's paintings plural.
Okay.
And so you can see things there. And I was just thinking, I did a portrait on there. There's a series I did in my 20s called War in Heaven. And they're all 8 feet high and 4 feet wide. And it's sort of the whole pile of them. So it's like 32 feet long. And in the middle...
Oh my God, do you still have them?
I still have them. They're in a shed in Ireland. And molding away.
I've seen them.
But the middle one is a portrait of my dad. And
really?
it was as I was thinking, and he's the devil. And he posed for me. So you can check it out.
Oh, I can't wait to see
Did
it.
he love that?
He did. He really
Made in the devil.
Yeah.
The devil has the most fun.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Is he falling? Is it a fallen?
His ass is being kicked. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
There you
That's
go.
great. what a wonderful thing to do with a father figure. Push you out of heaven. That's great. David Symons, is there anywhere people can find your work?
They can find some different projects I've done on my website, davidcsymons.com. So David, letter C.
And it has to be C, right? Because there's another.
Let's spell your last name.
Symons.
Yeah, that's good.
Symons, davidcsymons.com. If they need their accordion fixed, they can go to bigsqueezyaccordions.com and contact me through there.
Okay, great. Yeah. And the projects they're going to find are the Salt Wives.
There's a couple records from my old band, the Salt Wives.
Because the Salt Wives, I have to say, they are one of my I'm sorry they don't. Maybe they're going to come back, but at the moment they don't exist because they were one of the most creative, extraordinary,
thank you,
And
Brechtian.
so alive. They were so alive.
Yeah,
it was a good band.
They were just fantastic.
Thank you. And then
so creative.
And then another band called Inner Fire District, which was Vermont-based, is on there. And then also just some other things I've done over the years. So,
great. Sarah, can I have one last question? When's your next show? If people are in New Orleans, when?
October.
October of this year?
No, 25. Thank God.
25.
Year to paint. Yeah.
You're thinking far ahead. I can't think that far ahead. How do you think that far ahead? Oh my God.
I'm going to Ireland, and then when I get back, I am just no one's going to see me because I'm going to be painting like an insane person for a year. So there you go.
Wow. And it's going to be at the Sullivan Gallery?
Sullivan Gallery, yeah.
Okay, on Magazine Street.
On Magazine Street, thank you.
Great. Thank you guys so much for coming and giving me your time and for drinking quite a lot of Laphroaig along the way. That was great. Thank you very much.
We did. Thank you.
Thank you. This was lovely.
Yeah.
Great.
It's always fun to talk to you guys.
My thanks to David and Harry and Sarah, who took the conversation to the heart of the big idea of this whole podcast series. That is, if some of the concerns and desires in these stories seem familiar, well, they should, because I believe the Weimar Republic helped give birth to the modern world. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe or follow if you want to know when the next episode appears. I don't have any advertising budget for this show, or really a budget at all. I'm just some obsessed singer repurposing an old microphone. So if you leave a review on whatever app you use, or hit the star button, it really encourages the podcast to be found by other listeners. Or maybe just forward a link to a friend. that'd also be great. And I hope you'll join me in the coming months as I explore more about the strange birth, life, and death of an experiment in creating a new society. I will put images for this episode onto my website, bremnersings.com, BREMNERSINGS.com. You'll see pics of my charming friends Harry Mayronne, David Symons, and Sarah Brecht, and images of their work, with Sarah's wonderful paintings, Harry's puppets, and images of David Symons' Brecht Fest Festival, along with links to his music. I'll also include images of the other artists named in this episode. And who am I to discuss Weimar? Well, I'm not a sociologist, a political scientist, or an historian. I'm an obsessive artist, a singer, a playwright, a cabaret performer who's been obsessed with the arts and music of the Weimar Republic all my life. I've recorded 3 albums dedicated to the music of this time, and particularly the music of Kurt Weill and Bertolt Brecht. If you want to listen to them, just search for Bremner, Fletcher, Duffy in any music streaming site, and you'll find all my albums. And if you want to know more about my work, or see the images from this episode, or suggest a specific Weimar subject for an episode, check out bremnersings.com, BREMNERSINGS.com. I hope you'll join me next time for another walk through the amazing creative madness of 1920s Germany.